What if I told you that right now, in 2025, a Speaker of the House is refusing to seat a duly elected member of Congress, and this could be the blueprint for ending democracy as we know it? Mike Johnson isn't just playing political games with Arizona Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. He's testing whether he can simply decide which Democrats get to serve in Congress. And if he succeeds, 2026 and 2028 could look very, very different. This isn't about procedure. This is about whether your vote will ever matter again. Let's be absolutely clear about what's happening right now in Washington, D.C. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, has refused for over 3 weeks to swear in Adelita Grijalva, the representative-elect from Arizona's 7th Congressional District. She won her election with 70% of the vote. The election has been certified by Arizona's Governor, Attorney General, and Secretary of State. She is legally, constitutionally, and democratically entitled to her seat, and Mike Johnson simply won't let her have it. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays isn't mincing words about what this represents. He's filing a lawsuit against Johnson, and he's using terms like taxation without representation, the very principle that sparked the American Revolution. But this goes so much deeper than one congressional seat. This is a test case. This is the Republican Party checking to see if they can simply refuse to seat Democrats who win elections. And if they get away with it now, there's nothing stopping them from doing it on a massive scale in 2026 or 2028. Johnson has cycled through multiple excuses for his unprecedented obstruction. First, he tried to claim he was following the Pelosi precedent, referring to a situation where Nancy Pelosi delayed swearing in a member of Congress. But here's the critical difference that Johnson conveniently omits. In that case, the elected official themselves had requested a specific later date for their swearing-in ceremony. Adelita Grijalva isn't asking for a delay. She's begging to be sworn in. She's been to the Capitol multiple times. She's ready to serve. Johnson just won't do it. This matters because it exposes the bad faith at the heart of Johnson's position. When you have to keep changing your excuse, it's because you don't have a legitimate reason for what you're doing. Attorney General Mays points out that Johnson has already sworn in 2 Republican members of Congress this year during pro forma sessions, the very same type of session he could use to swear in Grijalva. So it's not about procedure. It's not about precedent. It's about power. Some have speculated that Johnson doesn't want Grijalva to be the deciding vote on the Epstein Files discharge petition. Others suggest purely partisan motivations, but whatever the specific trigger, the broader pattern is unmistakable. Republicans are increasingly willing to violate constitutional norms and deny democratic outcomes when those outcomes favor Democrats. Here's what makes this situation truly alarming from a legal and constitutional standpoint. The Constitution is explicit about this. When a representative is elected and that election is certified, that person has the right to be seated. No House rule, no Speaker's prerogative, no internal procedure can supersede the United States Constitution. As Attorney General Mays explains, there's strong case law supporting this position, including a case called Powell that establishes these principles. The Arizona AG is preparing to file this lawsuit within days, and he's confident about the legal footing. But the fact that this lawsuit is even necessary should terrify every American who cares about democracy. We're now in a situation where we need courts to force a Speaker of the House to do something that should be automatic: seat a duly elected member of Congress. Think about the precedent this sets if Johnson succeeds. If a Speaker can simply refuse to seat members of the opposing party, then elections become meaningless. Mike Johnson becomes, in Attorney General Mays' words, the king of the world and the king of the country, deciding who gets to serve in Congress regardless of how people voted. While we're discussing constitutional principles and legal precedents, let's not forget that there are real people being harmed right now. Over 813,000 Arizonans in the 7th Congressional District currently have no representation in Congress. They're paying taxes. They're subject to federal laws, but they have no one advocating for them in the House of Representatives. Adelita Grijalva hasn't even been given an email address. She cannot serve her constituents in any official capacity. There are flooding victims in her district who need federal assistance. There are veterans who need help with their benefits. There are seniors who need help with Social Security issues. And their elected representative cannot help them because Mike Johnson won't let her do her job. Johnson has claimed that Grijalva isn't working for her district. But this is absurd and cruel. She literally cannot work for her district because she hasn't been sworn in. She can't vote. She can't act officially. She's being blamed for a situation that Johnson himself created. This isn't happening in a vacuum. This is part of a clear and escalating pattern from the Republican Party of treating Democratic election victories as somehow illegitimate. We saw it with Trump in 2020 when he tried to overturn a presidential election and incited an insurrection at the Capitol. We saw it with Kari Lake in Arizona in 2022, refusing to accept her gubernatorial loss. We saw it just this past year in North Carolina, where Jefferson Griffin tried to disqualify 60,000 ballots from blue counties because he didn't want Democrat Allison Riggs' election to the state Supreme Court to be certified. The common thread? Republicans increasingly view Democratic victories not as unfortunate electoral outcomes, but as illegitimate by definition. If a Democrat wins, the election must have been rigged. If a Democrat is elected, they shouldn't be allowed to serve. This is not a sustainable approach to democracy. This is how democracies die. Attorney General Mays is blunt about this pattern. They've been willing to try to do things like this in the past. Let's go back to 2020, when they tried to undermine an entire election. This seems to be a trend where Republicans are willing to violate the Constitution and to violate laws in order to seize and hold power. One of the most revealing aspects of this interview is what it tells us about the broader resistance to Trump's second administration. Democratic attorneys general have become the front line of defense against constitutional overreach. Arizona alone has sued the Trump administration 27 times, and according to Attorney General Mays, those lawsuits have saved Arizonans $1.5 billion by blocking illegal actions, like the federal funding freeze and attempts to defund Head Start, Meals on Wheels, and education funding. But here's the truly disturbing part. Not a single Republican attorney general has joined these lawsuits. Not one. These aren't partisan policy disputes. These are lawsuits defending the Constitution and protecting federal funding that Republican constituents also depend on. But Republican AGs are so captured by Trump that they won't even defend their own state's interests when it means opposing him. This is why the 2026 Attorney General races are so critical. If Republicans sweep those AG races, there will be no state-level check on federal overreach. Perhaps the most chilling part of this interview is the discussion of Trump's troop deployments to American cities. On the surface, the administration claims this is about crime, but this appears to be about establishing infrastructure for election interference in 2026 and 2028. Remember, in 2020, Trump wanted to seize voting machines in Georgia. He wanted to use federal power to overturn election results, but he didn't have the infrastructure in place. He didn't have loyal troops on the ground. And critically, he didn't have buy-in from the Justice Department, where Bill Barr ultimately refused to go along with the most extreme plans. Now, Pam Bondi runs the Justice Department. She's an election denier. So is FBI Director Kash Patel. So is Dan Bonino at the DEA. The guardrails are gone at the agency level. And Trump is deploying federal forces to cities across America, including Portland, Chicago, and Los Angeles. If Trump has federal troops deployed in major cities when the 2026 or 2028 elections happen, he has the boots on the ground to do whatever he wants. Seize voting machines? He's got people for that. Intimidate voters? He's got people for that. And unlike 2020, he'll have a Justice Department that won't stop him. Local law enforcement doesn't want these troops. Sheriffs and police chiefs have made clear they don't need federal assistance. But this was never about helping with crime. This is about the 2026 and 2028 elections. Let's connect all these threads. Republicans are refusing to seat a duly elected Democrat in Congress. They're testing whether they can simply deny Democrats their rightfully won seats. Republican AGs are refusing to defend the Constitution when it means opposing Trump. Federal troops are being deployed to American cities despite local law enforcement opposition. And all of this is happening with an election-denying infrastructure at the Justice Department and FBI. This is how authoritarianism takes root, not with a single dramatic coup, but with a series of boundary-testing actions. Each one pushes a little further. Each one normalizes something that would have been unthinkable before. And if there's no consequence, the next boundary gets pushed even further. Mike Johnson refusing to seat Adelita Grijalva isn't just about one congressional seat. It's about whether Republicans speak, ears can refuse to seat Democrats, period. If he succeeds with one seat, why not 10 in 2026? Why not 50? Mike Johnson's refusal to seat Adelita Grijalva risks setting a precedent where speakers can nullify election results, meaning control of the gavel, not voters, would decide who serves. With federal troop deployments, an election-denying DOJ, and some Republican AGs refusing to defend constitutional limits, the tools to make that power permanent are already in place. Arizona's lawsuit must win decisively. Courts must rule. Speakers cannot refuse to seat duly elected members. Democratic AGs must keep fighting, troop deployments must be blocked, and voters must treat 2026 AG races as critical. This isn't routine politics. It's an authoritarian playbook. If there are no consequences, the next line crossed will be worse. Pay attention, push the courts and officials, and vote.
If you enjoyed the video, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos.